what I'm after today is this idea of character, and that's what I really wanted to reframe. Okay, so as self-regulars, we're going to go through a number of, as we learn this, we begin to transform the sort of superficial behavioral approach to going deeper now. And we're going to try, going deeper literally, because now what we want to do is we want to understand what's going on below the surface in the limbic system. So we're going to reframe what the kid says. And that's important. Realizing that what the kid says is if they're resisting or oppositional, these are defense mechanisms. And we're going to be analyzing ourselves as much. This is why self-reg is so important for us as a parent, as an educator, realizing that I have to be liberated myself from the old framework. But the last thing, okay, so I kind of think that what I'm saying here is I've said this a number of times, and Susan said it. Okay, so I think you get that. But my goal today was the last one on this bullet. And that's where I wanted to end up with these, what we were kidding around before we came on about with Stuart's reverse engineering. What I really was interested in when I was thinking about, I've been thinking about this for a long time, is that what I understand by character? With self-reg, what happens is we use the science now in a way that I find incredibly liberating. Remember that equation I started with that William James made between character and habits. And so I should probably spend a whole day just on this slide. But essentially what's going on here is habits are in fact a way of dealing with stress. And some of these habits, what we call bad habits, are actually maladaptive modes of self-regulation. So what they do is, so instead of saying, let's take as an example, Ragged Dick goes to these cheap entertainments and blows his money every night. So you can call it a bad habit, right? He's frivolous, he's that. But now with the sort of science lens that I'm so interested in, what we see happening here is that he's actually dealing with the stress of his daily life. It's a hard life. The stress of not knowing where he's going to sleep, not knowing if he'll have enough, food to eat, money for food, and so he goes to the so-called frivolous entertainment because it gives him a dopamine rush. And so what he's craving here is not the entertainment. What he's craving is the dopamine to counter all the stress of his life. And so what we're trying to do in self-reg is we want him, or we want ourselves, to be aware of, going through the 5 steps of self-reg from the sort of what Steph was asking for last week, that sort of metacognitive viewpoint. What we see is there's the perfect negative correlation between stress load and positive versus negative character traits. So the greater the stress load, the higher the likelihood of what we call negative character traits, which are really just ways of trying to get instant dopamine gratification or opioids, whatever. The positive are really habits that are growth promoting. So we've now learned, as in the example of tools of mind, we've learned more constructive ways of dealing with our stress that leave us calm, but also, quote, promote successful habits. So I gave the example of good study habits. So that would be, for me, that's something I definitely want both of my kids to acquire. But a good study habit is one where the actual habit of studying is dopamine driven. So what they've learned, so what we're able to do as educators is shift them from maladaptive, I'm going to avoid studying, to growth promoting, I'm going to enjoy studying. But it's here, we're not using this sort of, the sort of soft vocabulary, good, bad, enjoy, don't enjoy, but rather what we're doing is we are replacing negative modes of self-regulating with positive modes of self-regulating. And one of the studies that I find most interesting is that there is, in fact, a negative correlation between stress and dopamine. So what stress does is it counteracts the benefits of dopamine. And so dopamine does have these really positive sensations associated with it. And so what we find is that is that if you go back to what I was doing last week, trying to explain how something like studying or learning is just an ergotropic adaptation of an ancient system. It turns out that let's take studying. Studying is a physiological stress. And so the better we can self-regulate around studying, it's not a case now of pushing ourselves to ignore the negative sensations of cortisol. It's a case of reducing the negative sensations of cortisol so that the experience becomes one that is in fact pleasurable. And the pleasure here is dopamine driven. And if you think of yourselves, you'll know that you can think of examples where this is the case.